YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back, and we're through that big first wave of NFL free agency. Still some solid free agents out there, but we're at that point. We're into draft season here, and this is a video we'll probably have to revisit after that point. But in today's video, I'm going through every single NFL team and basically deciding if they got better so far, if they stayed the same, or they got worse, based on the roster at the end of last season. I think it's a mission for every team to actually get better. You don't want to stay the same. You don't want to get worse. If you're a rebuild team, it's understandable, but every team wants to get better. Every team will get better from the draft, but will they actually be better than they were last year? So again, we'll have to revisit. I'm going to like this one because I think a lot of this is, fact. It's pretty easy to see if a team got better or worse compared to last year, if they lost more players, have more holes, things like that. There are some teams I think are debatable, just very few, and we'll kind of talk about those teams when we get there. And these aren't predictions. I think schedule, who's lining up where for the team when it comes to week one will determine how they actually play. But this kind of gives you an idea where the state of the team is, the roster is. So definitely going to enjoy this. Subscribe to the channel for more content. And teams can still get better through free agency. Like I said, there's some more free agents available. We're kind of on to draft season, draft content starting next week. So make sure you join us for that. Follow our Twitter. Check out walkthemock.com. Use code GOATHOUSE. Any link that you need down in the comment section. Here's our Twitter, at GoatHouseNFL, just constantly talking. Start with the AFC East teams. We'll start with the Patriots. It might be the easiest one of this video. They definitely got better. They added a load of talent, absolute load of talent here. And, whether you think, guys got overpaid or what their contract looks like. And I guess that's good that this is kind of a separate video. We do grades based on the value of the contract, things like that. At the end of the day, they got a lot better adding some of these players. Again, whether you think they were good contracts or not, love adding that tight end duo. Do have a lot of opt-outs coming back, but in terms of adding guys this offseason, they've done a great job to make the team better. Now, they could be a serious contender. They literally could become a serious Super Bowl contender, I think, if they find a quarterback. Always been a big Cam Newton fan. I predicted him to win an MVP before he got drafted, so I've always rooted for Cam Newton. But, he's just not the same right now, and he could be better with these weapons. I don't think it's going to be a whole big difference, giant difference here. So if they find a legit quarterback, which is tough to do now, but maybe the draft, they could be legit. So it's a really good roster now, basically because what they did this offseason. So through the big first of free agency, they're definitely a team that is better compared to last year. No debate on that one. A lot of these, I don't think there's a debate, pretty straightforward. The Dolphins, interesting one. Looking at the offense, do they take a step down from losing Fitzpatrick? I don't say that. Tua is going to be the starter either way. And then really there's some shuffling, guys in and out here and there, but the only difference really here, and you can debate their center situation, I guess, bringing in Skura, but the only difference is adding Will Fuller, which is, it's one player, but that one player makes the offense better. Definitely, very good receiver, is suspended week one, does have injury concern, but that speed that they needed. So the offense gets better. It is one player. Look at the defense, though. Defense is interesting. It's definitely going to be a good defense either way. Kyle Van Noy out, Shaq Lawson out. Wasn't a huge Shaq Lawson guy, but the guys they brought in versus the guys that came, went out. Benardrick McKinney comes in. It's a pretty good pickup. It's a good inside linebacker. Van Noy's a different type linebacker, but I think Van Noy is more of an impact player. It feels like their defense actually got a little worse on paper. Again, the draft will happen. They'll add through there. It's going to be a good defense either way. Yeah, this is probably one of the ones that I guess is somewhat debatable, but, because Will Fuller, his presence will be such a big impact, but that's kind of one player. I want to say the Dolphins stayed. Yeah, I don't know if that one's actually debatable. Will Fuller's big time. It's going to help Tua. It just feels like this team stayed about the same. Again, defense, they shut guys in and out, but in terms of impact, they do add a slot corner like Justin Coleman. They've had a couple slot corners, though. It just feels like right now they stayed about the same. I thought they would go a little bigger. Getting rid of a guy like Van Noy, clearing that space, felt like they were desperate for that space, even though they had space. And they didn't really go tremendously big so far. So that's interesting. I thought they would do a little more, stayed about the same. Still a young team that's getting better, so they kind of can get better just by development, but that's really not this video. The Bills, very simple one. They stayed the same. They brought in some key players back. They brought them back, so they're staying the same there. Sometimes, you kind of have to stay the same, but at the same time, they're taking pay cuts. They're structuring deals a certain way so they clear a little more space. We find out that Tre'Davious White cleared some space, and the reason to do that is to actually get better, do more than stay the same. And they didn't really do that yet. And a team that's right there, they're close to. They went to the AFC Championship game last year. They're so close. And why do some teams don't go back to there the next year? It's because, they didn't get better. They stayed the same. And that's kind of what's happening here. So I'm not really predicting that's going to happen, but that's why it's kind of a shame at the same time, because they were, few more, big impact moves, maybe one more, getting a pass rusher that actually could sack the quarterback, something along those lines. They could have been a Super Bowl team. They could have been the contender, and then we could have said they got better. But staying about the same could be enough because it's a very good team. I expect them at the top. Maybe a guy like Josh Allen still developing, still getting better, very possible. I think specifically where I want to point out is John Brown goes out, Emmanuel Sanders comes in. That's kind of a new face. That is literally staying the same there. They both have injury concern. They're both the same type of player. But I wish they, go big or go home in that aspect. You move on from John Brown, you save that space, and you get kind of the same player. Yes, it's cheaper. That's cool. But, go for you were trying to match the Chiefs. Go for another, try to find another Diggs. Doesn't have to be that big of a name, but try to find another guy that's going to make that crazy of an impact for sure. It could even be the draft. I would rather them draft a guy in the first round. So yeah, that's definitely a team that stayed the same right now. Still going to be a very good team, obviously. The Jets, I think another very simple one. The New York Jets definitely got better. So we saw two teams from the AFC East got better, and then two teams stayed the same. The Jets, maybe people were a little disappointed because they wanted to get better on the offensive line. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. So that, I guess there is a little bit of a disappointing spot, but they had Corey Davis. They had even a guy like Keelan Cole helps. Coleman, running back, somewhat helps. They do add a guy like Feeney to the offensive line. Some small additions, but overall, Corey Davis, makes them better. Looking at defense, they had a number of guys. Carl Lawson, the big one. Jared Davis, sneaky good signing. They had, there's some smaller ones. LaMarcus Joyner, Sheldon Rankins could be more than just a small signing. Whether you think these are giant impacts or not, it's pretty obvious at the end of the day they got better. And even if you think they should have got better in other spots, at the end of the day, they got better. So that was the one that was a fact for sure. Like a lot of these, Washington football team, they had Fitzpatrick. Whether it's a big one or not, that helps them. They got better there. They had a guy like Curtis Samuel. I think it's such a fantastic fit, a receiver on the rise. They definitely get better with that. You definitely wish maybe they can get better at quarterback. Maybe they can get better at left tackle, perhaps. Those are kind of the wish list thing. At the end of the day, they added their offense. They got better. Defense was basically Darby out, William Jackson in. I think that's an upgrade, especially in this scheme. So maybe it won't be by a whole lot, but they definitely got better. Washington football team, they got better. I think that's another one that's pretty straightforward. Cowboys get Dak Prescott back on re-signing him, but that's staying the same. I know people are going to talk about injuries. They get this guy back because of injuries, and that actually factors in maybe how they will be this year. But injuries happen. I'm not really talking about it in terms of an injury aspect. So technically on the field, if everyone's healthy full term, they will likely be better than last year, but that's really not how I look at it. Offensively, overall, they didn't really do much at all. Adding Keanu Neal, will he stay healthy? I think it's a minor upgrade. I think shifting guys maybe to their correct spots if Keanu Neal plays weak side linebacker. Really no major addition there. There's some slight movement here and there, but overall, I think it's pretty clear as of right now that this team did stay the same. But I am excited about this offense if it's healthy. I think it can do great things. If they didn't, Dak, Leo Collins didn't even play it down. Tyrone Smith barely played it down last year. When was the offensive line, the full offensive line in there? Never. Dak got hurt. We talked about that. So I think that team actually could have won. They would have won the NFC East with ease, and they actually could have made some noise in the playoffs, even though that defense was pretty bad. So it's just about staying healthy there. Better better coaching on defense too. So they'll actually be better on the field. You know, if I'm projecting for the Cowboys, I'll project them to do better, but that's really not this video. You know, in terms of the roster additions is more of this video. I'll even factor in opt-outs, you know, if it's a tiebreaker, you know, close call. But I do expect overall to be the Cowboys to be better. Eagles, an interesting one from the NFC East here. Hurts to Wentz, I'm not going to really make anything out of that. You know, if it's Hurts, the idea of Hurts, because we can't really base too much off last year's small sample size versus last year's Wentz, I'll take my chances and say Hurts is better. But, yeah, it's really not how it works. You know, we're going to call it about the same in that area. Of course, Hurts has more upside, you know, so it could end up being better, but I don't think there's much of a difference in that one. It's a lot of assumption. Technically, Hurts is still on the team. This is where it gets interesting. The receiver unit, I mean, you had to move on from guys like Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson. So those were the right moves. But as we sit before the draft, they are worse at the receiver position because in a receiver needy room, they have less bodies in there that do get hurt, were too costly. Why you had to get rid of them? But they're decent when they're on the field. So technically, receiver unit actually got worse, even though, you know, I thought it was moves they should have made. Look at that defense. The defensive line so great. I love that defensive line. They lost Malik Jackson. I don't think a lot of people hype up Malik Jackson. So maybe there's other people out there that the way they've talked, you know, I've seen people talk, you know, about football in the comment section everywhere. You know, maybe they think they got worse in that regard. It's not really me losing Malik Jackson. Linebacker unit still atrocious. Really, their additions, Anthony Harris back there, which technically kind of makes them better. I think he fits what they're trying to do on defense. He had an off year last year, but I think he'll be okay with that pass rush. So technically, the defense got slightly better. Technically, the offense got slightly worse. It's just pretty much in the range of staying the same here for the Eagles, which with their cap space situation, I guess maybe it's good that they didn't get worse overall here, but obviously, every team wants to get better, unless maybe this is a rebuild, somewhat of a rebuild stage for the Eagles. The Giants, interesting one too. First glance, you know, what the Giants recently done, you're probably thinking, yeah, for sure better. You know, they made some big moves. One of the big moves that plays a part was staying the same with Leonard Williams, but they add Kenny Galladay, they add Dory Jackson, they add some small pieces here and there, Kyle Rudolph, then some rotation guys on defense perhaps. But yeah, they definitely get better. They definitely get better adding Kenny Galladay, Dory Jackson. I don't know if I don't think it's a lot better right now. Kenny Galladay, big impact guy. I don't know if Dory Jackson's going to make or break. You know, it makes them better for sure. But the way people, you know, because Giants been hyped lately because, you know, hyped up because of the additions they have, and they have got better. I just don't know if it's crazy amount better, but I do like this roster. Really, Zeitler out, you know, even though maybe it was the right move, you know, maybe right now they might be worse with him out. It's not a major difference though, but I think they got better. I do like this roster. The question is the quarterback and the offensive line. 2 out of the 3 most important things in football. Not saying they're bad, not saying they're good. It's a question mark, and there are some doubts, rightfully so. But the Giants did get better. It's just about those important pieces, putting it together, executing on the field, as everybody knows. Next up, we got we're on to the AFC North. That threw me off. I thought we were going another direction. No, AFC North is now Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, this is a very simple one. The Steelers got worse. The offensive line, surprisingly, didn't think it was possible. Actually feels worse right now. Villanueva's still hanging out there. Bringing in guys like Joe Haig to replace, you know, it's not ideal. Running back, you know, wasn't a big Connor guy, but really with him not there, you know, they might have got slightly worse. Receiver ends up staying the same. Yeah, so the offense looking worse. No Bud Dupree on defense. Yeah, you maybe like the idea of Highsmith stepping up, but still they lost Bud Dupree. Steven Nelson, it almost felt like they had to cut him, kind of a question mark. But at the end of the day, he's out of there. They got a hole at the cornerback position. So the Steelers are worse than they were last year, according to the roster. That's definitely one of those facts, like a lot of these. Ravens. Yeah, this has been a disappointing team in free agency. You know, there was so much debates going into free agency. Will this team prioritize and get receiver or edge rush? How about neither? Neither right now. So that's a little disappointing. Receiver stays about the same. Willie Snead's on the way out, so maybe slightly worse, even though you want to replace him anyways. Whether you want to or not, he's not there. There's no replacement that was brought in. Maybe somebody can develop one of those young guys, but that's really not this video. And then looking at offensive line, center still a big hole. Technically, Orlando Brown's still on the team right now. They bring in Zeitler, so maybe the offensive line slightly better because they bring in Zeitler, even though it's not looking good with the Orlando Brown situation. You look at defense, Ngakoue out, even if it was expected, he's out. Matthew Judon, even if it was expected, he's still out. I like the potential of Bowser, but at the end of the day, the edge rush position is worse, and the rest of the team is really no change. So the Ravens, it's just something that can't happen. You know, a team that's right there, you know, ready to compete, ready to go to the Super Bowl, and they feel like a worse team right now. And they're going to have to get a haul from Orlando Brown, hopefully, and then go big time in the draft because it's a team that you want to see get better because you don't even want to see it stay the same because they're kind of like the Bills where they're so close and staying the same hurts. You know, so this really hurts. So that's a little disappointing there for the Ravens. Still some guys out there, though. Bengals. So the Bengals offensive line situation, to add Riley Reef, they're going to play him with the right tackle. I think it's the idea that they could be better. Is the offensive line actually better right now? No, I don't think it is. I think it will be if I had to make an assumption. I think if they add a better left tackle, put Jonah Williams at guard, they might not even do that. So it's all assumption at this point. I think then it's definitely better. We need to see the units come together for all the other pieces like adding Riley Reef to work out. So I don't think the offensive line's better. It's definitely not worse. I don't know if that's possible. They lost A.J. Green. I think it's a good move to let A.J. Green go, but they do need another receiver in there. It's very important that they have 3 receivers that can start. It's that Joe Burrow type of, Zach Taylor type of offense. So they don't have that guy right now. So receiver, they might be they're a little worse, really. Not might be, they are, because that replacement isn't in there yet, which a lot of these things can come in the draft, especially a team at a high pick. And then you look at defense, Trey Hendrickson in, Carl Lawson out. It's probably close enough to say the same. I prefer Carl Lawson. And then you look at, they add Ogunjobi, that's out. Does that do enough damage there? William Jackson out. They bring Awuzie in, but they do bring Mike Hilton in. I like that addition. I do like that addition. I think that makes an impact. I think one of the better slot corners in football. I think him having that blitzing game. This is one of those debatable ones. They definitely didn't get better. We know that. It's either the same or worse here. This is definitely one of the debatable ones. We'll call it the same here. We'll give it to the Bengals. They stayed about the same. Again, I think I'd rather have Carl Lawson. William Jackson not being there hurts, but Mike Hilton, even though he's not the same type of corner, I think that helps. They're missing that A.J. Green, that other outside receiver. So, yeah, they're around that range. It's definitely a same or worse. It's definitely one of the few debatable ones in this video. The Browns in here. Offense stays the same because we expected it to. It was a good offense. Defense, they had some minor pieces, kind of up front within the front seven, we'll say, some minor pieces that actually slightly make them better. You look at the back end. You look at the secondary. John Johnson, Troy Hill, love it. That upgrade to secondary. This team got better, and that's what you want to do. With a team that would put up a fight with the Chiefs in the playoffs, they're getting better and better. They're actually getting better and better. Not just by development, not just by just over time. Young guys, new guys in there, new coach, chemistry. So they got better. You'd love to see that for the Browns. Still work to be done, though. Still work to be done. On to the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, the team has been very quiet. No new additions, for the team. They did get Aaron Jones back. Lost Jamal Williams. Not a major loss. Lost Corey Linsley. The offensive line, they even cut Ricky Wagner. They haven't got the replacements yet, so the offensive line looks worse. It's not something I'm worried about, though. The Packers are really good at finding the next man up. They're very good at developing offensive linemen. They're very good at coaching offensive linemen. They got good players in the unit. Aaron Rodgers, very good at making their job easier. So I'm not worried about it, but it is worse. It is worse right now. Defensively, they didn't do anything in the defensive line. Inside linebacker unit, didn't do anything there. Christian Kirksey isn't a loss, but they did lose him. Secondary stays the same. So it really, the only thing that's really different here, and they did lose Jamal Williams, that's not a major one, is the offensive line. So technically, what I'm doing in this video, the Packers are worse, but it's one of those teams that I'm not really worried about. But at the same time, this is kind of a bad thing, because it's a team, once again, that would, like we were talking about with the Bills, the Ravens, teams like that, they're right there. They were in the NFC Championship game 2 years in a row, and what did they do 2 years ago to this next year? They didn't really get better. They didn't really get better. It was tough for them to get better, and now they did the same thing again. If they would just find a way, I know it's tough, easier said than done. If they find a way to get better, it could be that Super Bowl team, win the Super Bowl. So it's not really a good thing, but it's not a team I'm really worried about, mainly because they got worse because of the offensive line. But it's one of those teams I don't really worry about their offensive line. Well, I should say this. I'm not really worried about their offensive line for the most part. Always looks good, but it did let them down in that Bucs game. So it almost felt like it had, in a way, for a game that major, that big of game, maybe it needed to get better. So I guess that's the downside of it there. Again, still some free agents left. The Vikings didn't do much on offense. The offensive line definitely needs to get better, but that was kind of like the Bengals. There's really no getting worse. The Vikings allowed the most pressure rate in the NFL. There's really no getting worse there, but they got to find a way to get better. Offense, the offense stays the same. Defense, they had a corner, one in Patrick Peterson. They had Dalvin Tomlinson to play D-tackle. And Michael Pierce was an opt-out last year. So, yeah, I said, you kind of could factor in some opt-outs because it's like new additions. Injuries, the Vikings had a load of injuries, but I don't factor that in because that's part of the game. And, yeah, maybe they'll be a lot better on the actual field when it comes to projections. I think we're like the Cowboys, talking about the Cowboys. I think different side of the ball, though, with the injuries. So when it comes to maybe projections, because there's a lot of guys coming back for defense. But at the end of the day, their additions were Patrick Peterson, Dalvin Tomlinson, and if you want to factor in Michael Pierce. But I'm mainly counting those two. They did lose Anthony Harris, a little off year last year. Free safety's not going to make or break this team. I don't think in terms of the additions, I was going to say not a whole lot better, but Patrick Peterson and Dalvin Thompson are. Either way, if they think they're that major or not, they definitely did get better, but hopefully they can handle that offensive line because that offensive line's rough. Like always. The Bears. Bears are another one of those debatable ones. I was actually kind of thinking about this one in my head because you start with Andy Dalton. Did they get better or worse than Andy Dalton? I guess that's the debatable part. I think from what they had last year, I think Andy Dalton's better. Is it going to be a whole bunch better? No, not at all. They had Damian Williams. I don't think that's one of an impact enough there. I like Damian Williams a lot, but how many reps is he actually going to get with Montgomery, with Tariq Cohen, these guys? So, and then looking through the rest of it, they maybe it's slightly better because Andy Dalton is staying around the same there. We'll call it slightly better. Defense, add some rotation guys in there, but then lose Kyle Fuller. That's a big loss. That's their number one corner that just started to get better a few years ago, so he's definitely not declining or anything like that. Definitely a very important piece to them in their defense. So that's kind of the dagger where they slightly get better maybe slightly on offense, but it does feel like they definitely get, even though, number one corner losing that, especially when the next man up, they get Desmond King, it's tough road there. So, but, since it's so close, they're kind of on the got worse side because I think Fuller, Andy Dalton versus Fuller, I think Fuller's more of a loss. Eddie Goldman might be the deciding factor here because he opted out last year. He's coming back. It's a pretty good nose tackle. So, like I said, it's a debatable one between same and worse. We'll call it same. Goldman decides it there. He bumps it just up the same. Bears are an interesting team to say the least. Going to the Lions, I guess another interesting one because you look at Stafford to Goff, and automatically you think worse, but I'm not so sure about that. Stafford is better. He's definitely better. Don't get me wrong there. Could they go worse than a 4-win team, though? I guess that's not this video predicting how many wins they're going to get. But I guess 2 years ago, Stafford misses a chunk of the season with being hurt. Last year, he's hurt. He's playing hurt, whatever it is. So I don't know if it's that much of a Stafford and Goff is that much of a difference. But for some reason, when you factor him into the Lions, I don't think it's that much of a difference. We'll call it slightly worse here, because Stafford definitely blatantly is better. But I guess Goff could have some upside to change the scenery. So it's pretty close to the same just because it's the Lions, really. But then looking at the rest, they had Jamal Williams. I like that. So maybe we're kind of close to even. But looking at the receiver position, they did add a few names, not big enough names. Kenny Golladay lost. It's a big-time player there. So we'll say the offense did get worse. I don't think it's by a whole lot. Looking at the defense, they've had some pieces here and there. Anzalone, that kind of replaces Jared Davis, though. Add some pieces here and there, but the key piece is Michael Brockers, which the Lions desperately need an interior guy. I like Brockers. I think he's that's a big-time addition, I think, in my opinion. The defense, I think, get better. It is one player in there. I think it kind of offsets both sides where it's definitely around the same. I just don't, even though it was kind of close, everything was slight, I don't think you can say this team really got worse. You definitely can't say they got better. So I think this, the same is just the right choice there. On to the AFC South, the Colts. After that, it's rare that I'm kind of hyped about a team after a loss. They lose to the Bills. They played a pretty good game. I thought the game plan was fantastic. I think they just couldn't execute in the big moments. And I'm thinking, usually that's just they're missing the big time playmakers, even though they do have a couple on defense there. They got great offensive linemen, but I don't really consider offensive linemen playmakers, obviously. So they were just kind of a few big time just few big pieces, maybe a couple big pieces away, and this team could be legit. That was my thinking after the Bills game. So I was kind of hyped because looking forward, they got the cap space, and they've been pretty disappointing here. Really, their addition is Carson Wentz. And I guess the good thing about a video like this is whatever side you are on Carson Wentz, whether you're a believer, whether you're a non-believer, we're all going to be in agreement on this type of video, because even if you don't believe in Carson Wentz, you just don't think he's going to be good. Right now, you don't think he makes the Colts a better team. If you are a believer, I don't think anyone's believing, maybe some people out there, but I don't think anyone's believing that it's just overnight. He's good. He's back to 2017. So even if he is good, it's going to be as the year goes on. So today, does Carson Wentz make them better? Absolutely not. I think we're all in agreement on that. Costanzo retired. They don't have a left tackle, not counting Tevi as a starting left tackle. So they got worse there. Really wanted them to add a receiver one. I thought they had a good number of receivers. Just wanted them to add a receiver one because I think you need two number ones today. Michael Pittman could be that number one. Fine with that. Looking at defense, they don't have any edge rushers. Houston's a free agent. Autry went to Tennessee. Secondary stayed about the same. I know people were complaining about Rock Ya-Sin. I think he can develop, especially in this defensive scheme. I'm fine with him. And Anthony Walker leaving, I don't make anything of that really. But I know last year a lot of Colts fans were kind of giving to me that I was way too low on Anthony Walker. So I would imagine those people think it's a major loss just by the way they're talking. So, maybe those people actually are even lower on the Colts offseason than I am really. But really those holes are there where they weren't last year. So yeah, it's definitely an easy one that they're worse right now. It's disappointing because they had that cap space to get better, and I was kind of hyped on them after the Bills game. They could have made themselves a championship team, and they're really just relying on their addition being Carson Wentz. A lot of talk that they're saving money to extend people. I don't think the Colts actually believe that. I think somebody's just kind of coming up with that. They do want to extend people, but you don't need that much cap space to extend people for the future, not right now. They keep saving space to save space. It keeps rolling over. They do, it's a little confusing, honestly. It kind of feels like they're afraid to get better. They just want to groom their own. So that's kind of the tough part. I mean, the Saints were negative 100 in cap space. They re-signed Jameis Winston and franchise tagged Marcus Williams. They didn't have $60 million to start, $70 million, whatever it was. So, the Colts were in on Trent Williams, too. They were trying to spend big on him. They had Quentin Nelson pitching them. So I don't think the Colts are actually saying they're not spending because I think somebody kind of came up with that along the lines. It's it's just straight ridiculous, let's be honest. It's definitely another one of those teams I'm disappointed in. The Texans, another weird one. So many additions, but they're just such minor additions. There's some that are sneaky good, but they're not impactful enough. Offense, I mean, we're counting it as Deshaun Watson's there and playing right now because that's the only way to do it, whether you want to predict he is or not. He's right there. He's there right now. But looking at the running back room looks pretty good. Not that makes a giant impact, but it looks pretty good. Offensive line looks better. It's not like, it's kind of an assumption. It's not like for sure better. Will Fuller is kind of a dagger, though. That's a big-time loss for this style offense, this type of offense. So, yeah, it's one player you lost there, but it's such a big one for this offense. So I'm saying the offense is probably in the range of staying the same. Defensively, yeah, is it weird? It's kind of weird the Texans kind of have less holes. They're more complete, but with guys that you can definitely find upgrades over. Because they had glaring holes. Now they add some cheaper guys in those holes, but you can definitely get way better in those guys, but they're not as big of holes now across defense. It's kind of a weird situation. It's just what they did this offseason. You really see that type of offseason. They had Desmond King. They had Shaq Lawson. Lose Benardrick McKinney. They didn't re-sign Tyrell Adams. Jeez. This is definitely one of the tougher ones. They definitely didn't get better. We're going to call it the same. I don't think you can debate they got better. I don't it's the Texans this is a weird one. It's a weird one. They're about staying the same. They go down and they go up, whatever spot you look at it. It's all going to rely on if Watson's playing or not. So they're going to stay the same. Probably one of the ones that are debatable. Titans, they made it, I guess, scary to start because you let Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith walk, and the offense is clearly worse. At that point, you lose those guys. But then what I like that they do is they prioritize the more impactful positions. They add pass rush, very important. You had Bud Dupree, big-time pass rusher, was my number 2 free agent this offseason. They had Danico Autry, I think fits the 3-4. He adds pass rush. They swapped some corners in and out. I don't think there's that much of a difference there. What they did there, they get Jayon Brown back. The defense definitely got better. It's definitely better because you had Bud Dupree. It's clear, from who you add, what type of players you add. Offense at the same time is worse because they lost those guys. But then they had Josh Reynolds in there, which is a step down from Corey Davis, but it's not that much of a step down. They add Lamb at right tackle. So really the only problem is where they're worse is with Jonnu Smith, but I think where they got better, is just so impactful at the pass rush position there. Then I'm actually going to say that it's not by much because they lost 2 weapons on offense, but I'm going to say they got better. I think mainly adding that pass rush. Josh Reynolds was the key here because if they didn't get Josh Reynolds, the offense was clearly worse while the defense was clearly better. They say the same. Josh Reynolds, not much of a step down from Corey Davis in my opinion. Corey Davis had 1 good year. Reynolds has been pretty solid. So that kind of bumped it up a little bit and then kind of replacing some of those guys at the cornerback position, adding guys like Janoris Jenkins. So I think the Titans got better because they finally got some pass rush. Jacksonville Jaguars, they didn't make a bunch of giant moves, huge major signings, which some people were insisting that they were going to do. It didn't surprise me just because they had a lot of cap. This is a team where if you have a lot of cap space, it's okay they didn't spend it because they got a load of draft picks. They're a rebuild team now that can turn around pretty quick because the impact young players they're going to bring in. It made sense not to just go crazy. Some other teams, it made no sense to do nothing, But they added players all over the place. The defense was pretty terrible on paper. Now they added a bunch of guys that's not magically going to be great or anything, but they added players. They had Marvin Jones on offense. They had guys here and there, so they definitely got better. Right now they don't have Trevor Lawrence, so it's kind of looking like the same situation at quarterback. We assume they'll add Trevor Lawrence. We're confident about it, but right now they don't have it. So looking at the rest of the roster, it's definitely better. There's no major impact players. There are impact players. But some people were talking about they're going to get these elite players in free agency. They got some good ones, but definitely didn't do that, which I'm okay with. Panthers offense, lost Curtis Samuel, lost Mike Davis. Mike Davis isn't a big one with McCaffrey coming back, but they lost Curtis Samuel, and they had David Moore, sneaky good signing, but you're definitely, it definitely feels like they're, you look at the offensive line, you look at Cam Irving instead of Russell Okung. It's just, a step down, losing Curtis Samuel, dealing with the offensive line. They do add Dan Arnold, that helps a little bit, but it feels like the offense is slightly worse. It is. It is. And then looking at defense, front seven's looking pretty good, actually. They add a guy like Hassan Reddick, and they get a deal with him. Very productive. It's going to help Brian Burns' game out a lot. They had Morgan Fox in there. They had Denzel Perriman. I think Reddick's the big one. The other ones, their impact, not major impact. I think Reddick's the big one. They do cut Trey Boston. They could get better at safety. They had Melvin at corner. Is that really an upgrade? I think this is actually, you feel like they got worse on offense and they got better on defense. It's kind of similar to the Titans situation, I think, because of the pass rush presence, the front seven presence that they added, which is such a huge impact in today's game. Versus, even though it is an impact, Curtis Samuel with David Moore, that's kind of the difference there. I'll actually say this is probably another debatable one between same and better. I'm actually going to say better just because the impact of the pass rush, and that's where they added, that's where they got better for sure. So I'll say better. It's pretty similar to the Titans one. I think Titans had got a little more of the impact role there. But yeah, similar situation, like I said. The Saints were in cap space hell. They had to cut a ton of players to get out of it. And I knew they were going to do that. Did I agree with it? Because you kind of hurt the future by putting cap there where they actually had cap space in the future. So I was almost kind of thinking, kind of just take the year off, which would have hurt a bit, but then go big, because New Orleans will still be an appealing spot. Go big in the future when you have cap space. They can still do that, but they did hurt it a little bit. That's kind of what I thought they should do, but I knew they were going to clear. It was obvious they were going to clear the space, but I thought they were going to clear the space and still be able to make some more moves, which I think they're still coming, but really all they did was clear that space and bring back Winston, which I like. I like that deal, and franchise tag Marcus Williams. So, and some other small moves there, but how they had to cut down the roster is another one of those fact ones. I think they're worse. I really wish that Jameis Winston had the roster of last year. I would have loved to see that. Maybe they make a bunch of minor signings coming up, but right now a lot more holes in the team than where you expected because they lost guys on pretty much every level. Now you think about it. Not safety. I'm kind of going through every unit in my head. Offensive line is going to be the same. Receivers pretty much only Michael Thomas. Running back will be fine. But every other level there, just because the tough cuts that they had to make. So they're definitely worse, but I'm kind of excited about the Jameis Winston Saints era. Hopefully it's more than 1 year. Hopefully it works out. And then a little more explosive plays in their offense, which could do wonders perhaps. The Falcons. Falcons is another one I was thinking about before I was recording this video, because the Falcons are a team, but if I had to predict right now, they're going to be better next year than they were last year. I think so. But are they better? In terms of this video, what they did with the roster, is their roster better? It's definitely not. Now we debate if it's the same or worse. Todd Gurley to Mike Davis. Todd Gurley's better, but it's not. I guess it's not a whole bunch of an difference there, a big difference there. Defensively, it's pretty much the same, but then you look at both Keanu Neal and Kazi are both out, Eric Harris in, small signing. So actually it feels like the defense is slightly worse on top of the offense being slightly worse, going from, this is one that's like so close, but technically, by the way I've been doing this video, their roster actually looks worse. But I do think there'll be when it's all said and done, they got to do the draft right. But even if the way they sit now, then they're going to win more than the amount of games they won last year. So, but that is not this video. It's not projection of the season. I predicted them to have. When the schedules came out last year, I said they have the hardest schedule. Based on who they're playing, but the way it's laid out, they have the hardest schedule. I think that ended up being true. So that plays a big part as well. Their schedule's not going to be the hardest in football. They'll be better this year, but the roster right now technically looks worse. It's kind of, I guess you could say same, because it's like not that impactful, but their safety units managed to look worse than it was last year, which really does it in there. The Bucs get, this is a team that kind of needed to get their guys back, before getting other guys. So that's a great thing, but it's a very obvious one that they stayed the same right now. But it's actually a team that, even though by staying the same, most time if you stay the same, maybe you're not, is there a way to get better? Maybe if you got injured guys back, for some other teams, or development. I think we talked about maybe Josh Allen gets better, and they can get better just by that. So it's possible that you can be better by staying the same. But other teams getting better, sometimes you actually could be worse in the next year. But the Buccaneers, kind of a new team last year. It felt like, Tom Brady just coming in, a lot of fresh faces, like units getting used to each other, and they really started to click playoffs the last couple of games of the year. So that's when we saw the true Bucs. They were a little bit of a disaster early on at times. So they actually, by default, could get better, but based on how I'm doing this video, the roster is exactly the same. That was obvious. Raiders is like the Raiders are like a couple teams we just talked about, actually, that were pretty similar. You look at offense. First glance, they kind of blew up the offensive line. I think what people don't realize is they had really good depth. They had really solid guys to step up. And a guy like Trent Brown was hurt. Some of those guys were hurt anyways. I would actually argue, by first glance, people would say it's definitely worse, but I would actually argue it's probably about the same. But I think the center position does it in. I think you do take a pretty decent step down from Hudson to, it's going to be Andre James. So the offensive line is worse. It's not as much as people think. Receiver, they go from Nelson Aguilar, who's looking really good in their offense, to John Brown. I think that's worse. It's not going to be by a whole bunch. I think it's worse. You add Kenyon Drake, which, whether you agree with the signing or not, it could help them a little bit. So maybe that offsets the receiver position there. But the offensive line, I do think, is slightly worse. You look at the defense, corners the same, safety's basically the same. Not enough of an impact to change that with Eric Harris, I suppose. Linebackers the same. Defensive line, the pass rush, they want to get better in terms of the pass rush. They had Yannick Ngakoue. I think that's a big-time pass rusher if you kind of just let him, he's got to stay on one team. You got to let him get in his groove, They had Quentin Jefferson, who I like his versatility. They had Solomon Thomas, who brings some good pressure on the inside. Could also play defensive end on the edge. They had the pass rush. So this was, like I was saying, it's pretty similar to some of the other teams we talked about. Titans and the Panthers. They got slightly worse in some spots, but they got better in one of the most important units in football, and that's pass rush. So with that, I don't think it's by a whole lot here, but I'm gonna say the Raiders actually got better. Still work to do. They're definitely an intriguing team the way they handle the offseason, but I actually, because of that pass rush. Broncos are next. Get the offense. Phillip Lindsay out, Mike Boone in. I don't think that's that much of a difference there. Phillip Lindsay's better right now, but I'm not gonna, I like Boone's upside. I'm not gonna call that much of a difference. Courtland Sutton was injured last year. They're going to be better on the field because they had Courtland Sutton, but in terms of additions to the roster, not going to factor that in like we did for the rest of the teams. Right tackle, they kind of needed a right tackle as it was, but they are worse at the position right now, in my opinion. So they do have a big hole there. So, not much change. Right tackle worse. So they actually maybe slightly worse because they still need to find that right tackle there. And then looking at defense, you're pretty much the same at the defensive line, pass rush, linebacker unit. The cornerback unit is where they get better. They add Kyle Fuller and Darby. I'm not in love with the Darby fit, but I think overall with Fuller and Darby, I think you get better. I think you get. This is a tough one. This is another one of those debatable ones. I think because they kind of brought their guys back. Is there a major difference? I think they still need a right tackle, but there is kind of a major difference with the cornerback position, and that's where they got better. So I'll call them better. It's barely by anything though right now, and they could be better on the field with development if Drew Lock develops. If they get a better quarterback, which is still possible through the draft. I'm not saying it'll happen. Not saying it's easy to happen. There's not that many quarterbacks that'll be better, but it's possible. We'll call it better. It's definitely one of those close ones. The Chiefs' offensive line kind of looks blown up. Whether you agree with moving on from Mitchell Schwartz, Eric Fisher or not, either way, I think right now they're worse there for sure. Is it going to be Nang and Kyle Long? I'm not really thrilled about Kyle Long as a tackle because I thought he was going to be a guard, but the guards are going to be Remmers and Tooney. They do add Tooney, which definitely makes them better. And they're better at the guard. They're worse at the tackle. I think being worse at the tackle is kind of bigger there. There's some receiver, or they brought DeMarcus Robinson back. They could lose Sammy Watkins, so maybe they're slightly worse there unless they add another receiver. Looking at defense, Damian Wilson's still a free agent. Bashaud Breeland's still a free agent. They've lost some guys. They didn't completely lose them, but they don't have them right now, throughout that defense there. They're not major, but they don't have those guys. So, surprisingly, this is a team that I think actually is worse right now. Still going to be a dominant team, one of the best contenders. Patrick Mahomes actually could continue to get better, which is a scary thing. And the run game will get better with adding Tooney. The tackle position's worse. Like I said, some guys that are still free agents throughout the defense, which is the kind of deciding factor that they're worse right now. Chargers, there's been a couple teams that I've been angry with throughout this video, because kind of getting excited about them maybe a little too early is another one of those teams, because I made a video like I do every year, right when the season ends, teams that I think could be contenders this year, the top 5 contenders, and I kind of predict the offseason with it in my head. I kind of have to. Like, they got to take that step up. I put the Chargers in a top 5 contender, Super Bowl contender. I always throw a surprise one in there, but I think is accurate. And I predicted the Chargers to have a big-time free agency. I think they'll do well in the draft. That still needs to happen. And I like the development, the upside of some of these guys. I like Brandon Staley. So I was kind of loving the idea of the Chargers. But they've let me down a little bit. I no longer think they're a top 5 contender. I thought they were going to go a lot bigger in free agency. Looking at offense, they lose Hunter Henry, so they got worse there. They add Corey Linsley, which they got better at center, but center isn't a whole, it's not that much of an impact, unless the whole offense lines fill out. That's what history shows the center position, just how it is. So they do get better there. It's not going to impact the whole roster by much at all unless you complete that offensive line. Their offensive line wasn't good last year, but those guys were starters for a reason. They don't have those guys right now. For the reason is they were the best guys in the roster, even though they weren't good. But they don't have those guys. They had Filer. The only good thing about Filer is he's played tackle and guard. I don't know if they got an upgrade there. I don't think they did. So they got giant holes technically, even though they added a big one in Linsley. Their offensive line is worse. It's worse right now than it was last year. And there's no debating that. Will it be better when the season starts? I sure hope so, and I think it will. Assumption. Right now, they managed to. It's worse right now, and they don't have Hunter Henry. So, and then looking at defense, move on from Casey Hayward. I understand he's not a fit, so they move on from him. I understand that, but at the end of the day, at outside corner, you're kind of worse. They bring back Michael Davis. Whether he's going to play in the slot, Chris Harris can play in the slot. They're missing a corner with Casey Hayward. Thought they would add a free safety. Thought they would add a little more pass rushers. There's not enough additions here. It's actually crazy that I thought this team was going to be a lot better at this point, and why I was predicting them to be a potential Super Bowl team. They've let me down a little bit. It hurts a little bit because that was one of my sneaky predictions that I'm usually, pretty accurate on. Maybe they still got time to turn around, but surprisingly, that they're worse right now because what they've lost and what they didn't gain here. So it's definitely one of those ones. There's a couple other teams in this video that it just hurts. I want to see everybody get better. The Rams, they add Stafford, so they get better over Goff there. Looking at, they add Deshaun Jackson. Like Deshaun Jackson, you always hate to bring stuff up like this, but it's one of those guys where you don't really expect him to play every game. So I don't think it's that major of an addition. It's not really an impact one at all, in my opinion. While he's healthy, I suppose, which is right now. So sure, over Stafford and Deshaun Jackson up. Offensive line was atrocious 2 years ago. It was pretty solid last year. It started to come down to earth at the end of the year, which offensive lines tend to do, especially the really bad ones. Actually, usually just start off really bad right away. But most offensive lines, they kind of fool you early on for some reason. They kind of wear down. So I think they started to play, kind of came back down to earth, and that affected Jared Goff a little more. They need a center right now. Blythe is a free agent still. Maybe they can get him back, but currently he's not on their team. But overall, the offense is better, mainly because Stafford kind of pulling the weight there. Defensively, lost John Johnson, which I'm okay with because they have a number of safeties. I'm actually a fan of some of those guys, especially Taylor Rapp, but John Johnson was one of the best safeties in football last year. Technically, they're worse. Troy Hill's gone. I think they'll be fine because they got Jalen Ramsey. They got Darius Williams. A guy like Burgess can play in a slot, can play safety. I think they'll be fine, but technically they're worse. Lost Brockers in the defensive line. So the defense is definitely worse. here's by what I'm doing in this video, basically like the formula I'm doing in this video, they've definitely they stay the same. But I think they actually could be better on the field. Why? Because the quarterback position is the most important position in football. You have and you got Stafford. You got better there, so they can be better on the field. So why not just say they got better? It's because the entire roster glaringly is worse. Some of those teams where they added to the pass rush, and their roster, the entire roster as a whole is about maybe the same, but so they maybe a little better. But since they added the pass rush, yeah, I say they got better. But this roster is blatantly, the roster is worse, but they actually could be better because Matthew Stafford. So Matthew Stafford kind of makes it the same here, but they didn't have much to work with. But you kind of got the feeling they were going to pull some big time veterans from 1-year deals. Some teams actually did that, but not the Rams, surprisingly. Cardinals. Some changes here with the Cardinals. You look at the offense, though. Offense line staying the same. They lost Kenyon Drake. Whether you're a big Kenyon Drake guy or not, does feel like they kind of got worse. It's not a big one, though. But then you add A.J. Green, which I thought they could have used more of a guy, shifty, separator, inside, in the middle of the field there. But you do get better with A.J. Green. I think it kind of offsets there, A.J. Green, Kenyon Drake. A.J. Green, the bigger name, but it's not much of a difference there. You're looking at defense, again, they had big name guys. They had big name J.J. Watt, but they lose Hassan Reddick. I don't know, in terms of impact of the roster, I don't know if there's that much of a difference here. J.J. Watt does have the injury concern. If he's fully healthy throughout the year, maybe that's slightly better. I know there are a little different positions in this 3-4 scheme. Chandler Jones was hurt, so technically they'll be better on the field, projections-wise, but he was injured last year, doesn't factor into the roster. They had Malcolm Butler, but they lose Patrick Peterson. Cornerback unit still, it's still pretty rough. Lose Devondre Campbell. That's really not a big one because they have Hicks and Isaiah Simmons. It's kind of just back and forth here pretty clearly. So yeah, I think this is one that people will try to debate, but I think it's a fact that they're pretty much they're the same but with different players. I think they can be better on the field when it comes to projections. Because Chandler Jones coming back, because Kyler Murray, you hope, is developing right. I didn't love the way he played at the end of the year, though, I'll be honest. But they definitely stay the same, kind of the roster-wise. Seahawks trying to keep Russell Wilson happy. They bring Chris Carson back. They lose David Moore, but they add Gerald Everett. Offensive line, it's slightly better. Gabe Jackson is slightly better there. Yeah, that helps. They needed anything at the guard. So I say the offense is slightly better here. It's definitely not the same, but it's not a whole lot. It's slightly better. Defense, they cut Carlos Dunlap, but that's a loss. As soon as he came in, the defense playing a lot better. He's playing pretty well. When the defense was bad, when the secondary is bad, it's because they couldn't cover forever. They had to cover forever, though. So they're kind of back to that, Pass rush is worse. KJ Wright is a free agent right now, and they do want to have a guy like Brooks step up, but KJ Wright actually played well last year. He's currently a free agent. Cornerback, they lost Shaq Griffin. Quentin Dunbar is a free agent right now. Cornerback unit is kind of a mess. So like I said, offense was slightly better, but there's just some major holes in the defense, in important spots. So the Seahawks, it's not by a whole lot, but they actually got worse just because that defense, what they're missing, overtakes the slight improvement of the offense. So, yeah, that's definitely not one. That's definitely how it is there with that one. And then the Niners are next. They bring guys, I think it's a pretty simple one. They're bringing guys back, some minor additions maybe. They bring in Alex Mack. That slight bump up defensively. Corners, they lost Sherman, Witherspoon. Is it that much of an impact? You can debate that. At the end of the day, either way, the cornerback room is worse. I think this is a pretty clear one in terms of they kind of stayed the same, which it's a really good roster, and they kind of get better by default with the injuries coming back, the guys that were hurt coming back. But that really has nothing to do with the roster itself, which was this video. They stay healthy. It's a damn good roster. Could be a contender. I guess the question mark at quarterback, could that hold them back from being that with Garoppolo not playing well, but also hurt. Just too many guys that are hurt on this team. It's unfortunate. But yeah, really good roster, but stayed the same. Is that all of them? That might have been a long video. 54 minutes. Wow. Really enjoyed that one, debating that one, because I think this is one where I was about to say one where people really can't debate things in the comments because there's kind of straightforward things, but people will find a way. They'll find a way. So, but still enjoy making it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Follow our Twitter for constant updates and talk. We'll have actual predictions, and the draft will change things for sure. So really excited to cover all that. Really excited for every team to get better. That's what the draft's for. Every team will get better there. So, yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.